Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com and one of our fantastic True Health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 213. We have with us Bruce Friedrich, who is the co-founder and executive director of the Good Food Institute, and he's also the author of Clean Protein, the revolution that will reshape your body, boost your energy, and save our planet. Very excited for today's interview. I know we're going to cover a lot of interesting information about everything that we're interested in, which is food and getting our health back. And saving the planet while we do it. I think that's a great mission. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm thrilled to be here.
Everyone should be interested in this interview because we all eat.
Exactly.
I'd love for us to start this interview by you sharing your story. What led you to become the co-founder of this wonderful institute and also the author of Clean Protein?
So I guess those are two different stories. So the co-founder of the Good Food Institute came about because I've been working against industrial animal farming for quite some time. And I saw what happened with companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods and Tofurkey and Hampton Creek and other companies that are creating better, healthier, more sustainable products that people actually want to consume. And the sort of central brainstorm of these companies is that pretty much everybody makes their food purchasing decisions with considerations about taste and price and convenience. And so we can transform agriculture away from the industrial use of animals with the myriad harms entailed by those production practices by creating products that people actually want to buy. And that's the focus of the Good Food Institute. People can find out all about it online at gfi.org. With regard to the book Clean Protein, Kathy Freston, my co-author, invited me to co-author a book with her. We have both been investigating the science of nutrition and the science of food for decades. We've been friends and have sort of kicked ideas around for more than 10 years, the two of us, and it just seemed like co-authoring a book would make a lot of sense. She invited me to do it. Hachette and her agent, and then Hachette, the publisher, were excited about the book. And so we wrote it together, and it was really a fantastic experience. She's a phenomenal co-author.
On a personal level, what happened in your life that had you begin to get excited about a more plant-based diet and cleaner eating?
A little over 30 years ago, I read a book called Diet for a Small Planet, which I imagine many of your listeners are familiar with. And Diet for a Small Planet by Frances Moore Lappé. And in Diet for a Small Planet, Frances Moore Lappé makes the pretty intuitive point that growing massive numbers of crops to feed those crops to animals so that we can eat animals, it's vastly inefficient. The most efficient animal at taking crops and turning them into meat is the chicken. And in Nature magazine, some agricultural economists a couple of years ago, they crunched the numbers and they said that even chicken, it takes 9 calories in the form of oats or wheat or soy or whatever we're going to turn into animal feed. It takes 9 calories fed to a chicken to get 1 calorie back out. So that's literally 800% food waste. So I consume about probably 2,000 calories a day. If I'm consuming plant foods, I require 2,000 calories of plant food production. If I were to get those 2,000 calories from chicken, I would require 18,000 calories of plant foods to be produced, fed to the chicken to get 2,000 calories back out in the form of chicken. And other animals are even less efficient. So it was basically concern for the planet that convinced me that I should go plant based all the way back in 1987.
Wow. Now, since going plant-based, did you also notice a shift in your mental clarity and your health, in any other area of your life as well?
Yeah, I mean, I was 18 years old when I adopted a fully plant-based diet, and I mean, the caveat here is I grew up in Oklahoma, so I'm not sure. Like the first time I met a vegetarian, I thought probably they had some sort of disease or something. They couldn't metabolize meat. It was, the concept of not eating meat was so bizarre to me, and so I went from probably even by standard American diet standards, a bad diet. I was also a jock playing football and running cross country in Oklahoma. So, the two food groups were Big Macs and Dairy Queen Blizzards. So I went from that to a pretty healthy whole foods plant based diet, and I found almost instantaneously. I mean, I lost some weight that I didn't even know I needed to lose. My 10K time dropped a lot, and it had plateaued by that time because I've been running, cross country for like 5 years. Um, I needed less sleep. I needed less coffee. I had more mental clarity. And I think some of that was a shift from just the worst possible diet to the best possible diet. Um, but definitely it had to do with working with my metabolism rather than against my metabolism.
That's quite fascinating. How did you figure out, I mean, at age 18, how did you figure out how to eat a healthy plant-based diet? Every time I've in the past I've gone vegetarian or vegan, I ended up, not doing it in the healthiest way. I think a lot of people who try attempt at first end up eating more processed food, more bread, more pasta, because they know, okay, well, this package isn't, there's no meat in this package, so I can eat it, instead of knowing how to incorporate more vegetables and more legumes and more healthy whole grains. So what helped you to dial in your way of eating?
Well, it helped a lot. I was attending a small liberal arts school in Iowa called Grinnell College, and there wasn't that much processed food that was entirely plant based. So I ended up eating a lot of rice and beans, a lot of whole nuts, a lot of other whole grains. They had a salad bar for lunch and dinner every single day, so a lot of salads. Um, I mean, I did have a problem that's somewhat rare in the United States, and that was that going from being very athletic and going from burgers, and they had an ice cream machine, so I went from burgers and ice cream to a whole foods plant based diet. I did realize quickly that I was going to have to make a little bit of an effort to get all of the calories that I needed, and fortunately my college was very accommodating in terms of having plenty of nuts and plenty of beans and plenty of peanut butter. So I did end up having to eat a lot of sort of high fat plant based foods. But as you and your listeners will know, monosaturated fats are actually very healthy, where saturated fats are very unhealthy. So that worked for me, and allowed me to fuel my body, put the weight that I had lost back on, and continue to feel just incredibly healthy through the diet that I was eating.
The last 30 years, your book almost is like 30 years in the making, because this is something that you've personally, this personal journey of yours, that every day for the last 30 years you've been eating this way, and then you take all your knowledge and all of your research and put it into your book. Can you tell us a bit more about your book and maybe teach us some lessons from your book?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's precisely right. I mean, so for both Kathy and for me, this is the book I think we were born to write. So in the United States, if you look at kind of anything that talks about health in the United States and what's been happening over time, what you find is more and more people. I mean, we as a country are getting heavier and heavier. And as we get heavier and heavier, we find more and more diabetes, more and more heart disease, more and more stroke, more and more Alzheimer's disease. And these diseases of affluence are dietary diseases. And as people eat a more Western diet, as people eat more animal products, there is more degenerative disease. And as people shift away from animal products and toward more, especially whole plant foods, we find that obesity rates go down, heart disease and cancer, which are the two biggest killers, stroke and Alzheimer's, all of these problems either lessen or go away as people shift the way that they're eating. And Kathy and I are a testament to that. And we also did a deep dive into the nutrition science, and we looked at the meta studies and we looked at the work of groundbreaking doctors like Dr. Dean Ornish and Dr. David Katz, Dr. Michael Greger, people who have been doing lots and lots of synthesis of all of the nutrition research that's out there. And they come to the same conclusion as the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which looked at all of the evidence and found that the more people rely on plant foods as opposed to animal foods, the healthier they are likely to be.
Fascinating. Some of those meta studies, can you cite just off the top of your head what was the most fascinating meta study to you? The data that you saw that really got you excited as you were researching for your book?
I mean, I think one of the so there's a position paper, which is not a meta study proper, but it's a position paper of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is easy to find if you just Google Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and vegetarian and vegan diets. Um, what the researchers at AND did was looked at all of the studies that exist. They didn't submit their white paper to peer review, although they did publish it. And what they found is that vegetarian and vegan diets, one, they are healthy for every stage of life, from infancy to very old age. Every stage of life, vegetarian and vegan diets, including pregnancy, are healthy diets. And in fact, that vegetarians and vegans tend to have much lower rates of these degenerative diseases that we've been talking about, like heart disease and cancer and stroke. It's not a meta study, but super interesting to us is the work of Dr. T. Colin Campbell at the Cleveland Clinic and Dr. Dean Ornish from the Preventive Medicine Institute. These, up until 20, maybe 25 years ago, there was this assumption that as we got older, our arteries were likely to clog. And if something else didn't get you, coronary occlusions would. You would eventually die of heart disease, and this was just a part of getting old. And what both T. Colin Campbell and Dean Ornish, these two medical doctors, have proved is that, in fact, nobody has to die from coronary artery occlusions. Both of them, with people who go on their low-fat, completely plant-based diet, they're actually able to unclog people's arteries, which was previously thought to be impossible. And the thing that's remarkable about this is that heart disease, coronary occlusions, is the number one killer in the United States, and yet it's basically slow suicide. Nobody has to die from it.
That is quite fascinating, especially if you look at, well, why is the body creating those clogs in the first place? And it's out of a need because the body doesn't have the nutrients like vitamin C, for example, which is the one of the building blocks to making collagen or elastin. And so the body uses like cholesterol to patch up the arteries in times of when the arteries are weakest, and that of course is in the part of the heart where the pressure is the heaviest. And I've spoke with naturopaths that have been able to successfully reverse heart disease when they take the person and go, okay, well, we're going to fill you up with the nutrients your body needs to make healthy arteries, to make the tissue that makes healthy arteries,
Mhm.
like the trace minerals, copper, selenium, and all the vitamins like vitamin C. They're all the raw building blocks for collagen and elastin. and then the naturopaths get them on an anti-inflammatory diet, which is a plant-based diet, which is, heavy in the plant-based foods. So lots of healthy vegetables and fruit, and the body just assimilates all that nutrition and heals itself. And then we have MDs that just are seeing the drugs and just go, okay, oh, you've got cholesterol problems. Here's some anti-cholesterol medication, and that doesn't do anyone justice because cholesterol medication, the only thing it does is bruise the liver, because the liver produces about 30% of our body's cholesterol. And so
Yep.
the medication bruises the liver, and that has nothing to do with how much cholesterol you're consuming through your mouth. And cholesterol in and of itself is actually healthy. The body needs its raw building blocks to make sex hormones and stress hormones. But we're getting the wrong kinds of fats, like you had mentioned earlier. We're getting absolutely the wrong kinds of fats in our standard American diet, and we're not getting enough of our nutrition from vegetables, from whole foods. And so it's kind of like completely backwards what we're doing right now, which is really strange because if we look at the last 100 years, I'm sure you have a deep understanding of the history of agriculture and our food. 100 years ago, we were eating a more whole foods diet than we are today, obviously. A
Hmm.
100 years ago, our great grandparents or our grandparents would have cooked from scratch, for the most part. And if we go back even 150 years, they're definitely cooking from scratch. And they have innovated food to make it, like you said, more affordable, more readily available, or easier to buy, easier, so sustainable on the shelf. So it has shelf life, so we can easily access it when we want to, and also make it taste good, make it affordable, right? So all these things that have motivated us around food in the last 100 years have not even begun to consider the health impact. And now it sounds like your biggest mission between your book and also your Good Foods Institute is to help us, take that direction and go in the new direction of food innovation, where health of our body and the ecology of the planet are the number one motivating factor.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And in our book, Clean Protein, we really do distill the science. So we talk a lot about that Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics um, meta review of all of the science. We talk about some specific, really interesting work that's been done and published in the peer review literature, like T. Colin Campbell, a cardiologist from the Cleveland Clinic, who took people who had advanced state heart disease. Many of them were told by their doctors that they had, limited time left on Earth. Some of them were on heavy drugs. A lot of them had trouble just walking up a flight of stairs. And he put them on a completely plant based diet, unclogged their arteries, allowed them to walk upstairs, restored their sexual function, and brought them back really from the brink of death. And we tell a bunch of those stories in the book, and it's just incredibly, incredibly interesting. Some researchers at Oxford University last year published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences where they put dollar values on the healthcare benefits of a shift in the direction of plant-based eating. And they end up with a gradation where they found that if people cut way back on animal product consumption, continued to consume some animal products, but aligned their diets with some of the nutrition guidelines that suggest somewhere on the order of a pack of cards size amount of meat on a daily basis rather than the 220 pounds of meat per year that Americans consume. They found that that sort of dietary guideline would avoid 5.1 million deaths per year by 2050. And then as people shifted more toward vegetarian diets, from 5.1 to 7.3 million deaths avoided every single year, and going all the way to an entirely plant based diet, avoiding 8.1 million deaths per year. And the healthcare related costs that associate with all of that, I mean, because it's not just people dying, it's also people having diabetes, people being obese, people suffering from Alzheimer's. The healthcare costs associated, if people were to cut back from what they're currently consuming to consuming about a third of what they're currently consuming, that would save $700 billion per year. And if they moved, if the all the whole world moved to completely plant-based, it would save $1 trillion a year in healthcare costs, according to this peer review study from Oxford University.
And so that those savings would trickle down to our what we have to pay for our health insurance. So those countries like the United States, where if our employer doesn't pay for our health insurance, we do. My husband and I have to pay for our health insurance, and it is we have to pay more for health insurance than we do for our two-car payments. And I'm just like I'm blown away at how much it costs. And we only see naturopaths. We're really relatively healthy people, knock on wood. Um, but it's so expensive because so many people are sick. And so if we, as an entire planet, like what you're saying, is if we went from eating one third less animal products, and instead of animal products, we consume, so two-thirds of what we would normally eat from animal products could be then beans and legumes. And of course, I want to get into a little bit more detail about what you consider clean protein and what people can do, because I think there's going to be some listeners who are afraid of either cutting back on their meat consumption, their animal products, or completely going vegan, because it's this big unknown, right? It's kind of, I know I'm there a little bit, and I made my New Year's resolution to eat less meat. I'd love, and my husband's right on board. He wants to eat less meat, and I think that's really cool that he actually told me a few months ago that he wanted to go more plant-based, which was surprising because I'm the health nut in the family. But it's
That's awesome.
it's the direction we're going, and he's very intuitive. And I think he's picking up on that. We really, as a planet, need to. I mean, it's sort of like look at the ecology of the planet in the next 50 years, like you did, and there's a major fork in the road that we need to take. We need to consider that every single choice we make around our food on a daily basis is going to feed our cells, or is going to starve them of nutrients. Is going to either fill us with toxins, or is going to help our body remove the toxins. It's either going to have us die at 50, 50 something. My mom, who was the healthiest person in my life, died of liver cancer. My dad, 6 years later, died of heart disease. Both my parents, if I could go back in time and share this information with them, they could have prevented their illnesses. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, is so that I can help the listener to prevent what my parents, both died in, their 50s and 60s. They died super early, and they didn't have to. And I'd love to be able to save people's moms and grandmas and aunts and uncles, by disseminating this information. So what you're saying is, if someone just takes on the challenge of eating one third less, so one third of their protein then comes from animal products, and the two-thirds come from um, plant-based protein. Is that what you're saying?
That is a huge step in the right direction. I mean, there's something called Meatless Mondays, which is endorsed by the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, the Columbia School of Public Health, and I think 20 something other schools of public health. And they encourage people to shift away from animal product consumption as much as possible, starting with one day a week, and then moving from one day a week to sort of more and more. And their overall recommendation is that people should be eating about about as much meat as the size of a deck of cards. So not very much at all, which is actually, I think, a little bit less than a third of what people are consuming right now. Many people are consuming significantly more than that on a daily basis, to the point that in the United States, our average meat consumption is like 220 pounds per person, and I'm not eating anybody. So some people are eating 440 pounds. They're eating mine, but the less meat people consume, that's really the point of this Oxford University study. The more you're eating legumes and nuts and whole grains as your protein source, the healthier you're going to be. And it's not an all or nothing thing, right? So for people who just absolutely have to eat some meat, cutting back will have fairly immediate health benefits.
Let's talk about the clean protein, which, the title of your book. I definitely want to know, why did you title your book Clean Protein? Is it because people who need or want to go or should go or have not yet gone vegan are most obsessed about protein? I know the meat eaters are like, well, if I go vegan, where's my protein going to come from? Is that why you titled it Clean Protein?
I mean, we titled it clean protein in part because plant-based protein is literally cleaner protein. So, as you probably know, according to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, tens of millions of people get sick from eating contaminated meat every single year. Tens of thousands of people end up in the hospital, and more than 1,000 die every single year because of bacterial contamination on meat. If you're getting your protein from legumes, beans, nuts, whole grains, that goes to virtually zero. And then there are drugs in the meat. Um, Nicholas Kristof, the columnist for the New York Times, a couple of years ago, wrote about a study from Johns Hopkins researchers in which they found Benadryl, the active ingredient in Benadryl, the active ingredient in Prozac, aspirin, arsenic, all kinds of things in the chicken samples that they tested. And Christoph sort of made light of it. He ended his column saying, learning about drugging chickens in the chicken industry makes me want to eat a Prozac laced chicken nugget to try to feel better about it. But it really is concerning to a lot of people. I mean, even if the sort of contamination numbers are such that FDA says you don't need to worry, and in many instances they don't say that. But I think most people don't want to be eating protein-laced chicken nuggets. I think most people don't want to be eating contaminated meat with E. coli and Campylobacter and all of these other problems. So as you shift away from those products, you are literally eating protein that is cleaner. So that was really a big part of it.
Interesting. And I just saw this thing on Facebook where this doctor was discussing how plants are the only things that create protein and that, animals consume it and then, break it down and maybe the body will take the amino acids to make something else, to build something else, but that it was the plants itself that make the amino acids and not the animal. Can
Yeah,
you speak to that?
yeah. I mean, that's basically that goes back to the discussion of my decision to go completely plant-based on the basis of the fact that it is just true that you take massive amounts of protein that are fed to animals, and then the animals break those proteins down, change the nature of the proteins, but they're not making more protein. And in fact, you're putting in 20 calories of protein for every calorie of protein that you're getting back on average. So that's sort of the save our planet aspect of the book's subtitle, the revolution that will reshape your body, boost your energy, and save our planet. It's just taking massive amounts of protein in the form of plants, cycling that protein through animals, and then getting protein back out. It's just extraordinarily inefficient.
It's funny. It's like why don't we just cut out the middleman?
Well,
Why
no,
don't
that's exactly right. And one of the things that the Good Food Institute is working on is figuring out a way to deliver high quality protein in the form of plant-based meat that people actually want to consume in much the same way that right now, as a percentage of the overall milk market, 10% of it is plant-based, almond milk and soy milk predominantly. Plant-based meat has not gotten anywhere near there yet. It's about a quarter of 1%. But we absolutely think it can get there. And Eric Schmidt, who is the current chair of the board of Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and he was previously the CEO of Google, he was asked to reflect on 6 technological innovations that he thinks will positively impact the world by a factor of at least tenfold in the fairly near future. And the first thing he talked about was plant-based meat. And what he called it nerds over cattle. And he talked about plant-based meat for its capacity to deliver high quality protein, especially to the developing world, without all of the inefficiency and without the colossal negative climate impact, because chicken, again, is the least climate inducing animal product, the least climate change inducing meat. And yet, chicken causes 40 times as much CO2, 40 times, 4,000% relative to legumes like soy and peas. So, plant based meat for people who want meat, as these companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods and Tofurkey and Field Roast, as these companies get better and better at biomimicking the taste of meat, they are healthier products, they are cleaner products, and they will, quite literally save our planet as people shift to them.
Have you heard of the project that Bill Gates is a part of, where they're trying to make meat basically in a lab? So they're like, you can still have your steak or your chicken because it's made from stem cells in a petri dish.
Yeah, I mean that's called clean meat, and there's
Okay.
actually yeah, so that's called clean meat. Chapter 10 of our book is about that process, and yeah, I mean it's not petri dish meat at scale, right? So just like every processed food starts in a lab, but we don't say lab grown cornflakes. Uh, this is this is meat that will literally be cleaner, so none of the bacterial contamination and none of the drugs, except that it's real meat for people who want to consume real meat. So it's real meat with 95% less climate change, 90% less water, 99% less land required, and you can repurpose a lot of that land to carbon sequestration and other things that are good for the climate. So for people who insist on continuing to eat meat, this is something that Bill Gates and Richard Branson and even Cargill, the massive meat conglomerate, Cargill invested in a startup company from the Bay Area called Memphis Meats.
Wow, so that it's really something that is definitely going to happen in our future. We're sometime in the next 10 years. Do you think we're going to see this, quote unquote, clean meat in our grocery store?
I think probably in the next 5 years we will see clean meat in the grocery store. So that's the target of people like Memphis Meats and Super Meat and Mosa Meats. 2 years ago, there was only one clean meat company that had incorporated. That was Memphis Meats. Now I think there are 8 or 9 companies, and Memphis Meats has gotten investments from Cargill. There's an Israeli company called Super Meat, and the largest poultry producer in Europe just announced a multi-million-dollar investment in super meat just in the last like 4 or 5 days. So for people who really want to eat real meat, this is an option that's certainly much better for the environment. It's a much cleaner product, and it's sort of I think its main competitor will be plant-based meat. And our expectation is that if X is plant-based meat and Y is clean meat, in 30 or 35 years, X plus Y will be 100.
Wow. Very interesting. I don't know why, but when I first heard about this basically petri dish, chicken McNuggets, um, I kind of got queasy. It was like I think I'd rather eat some legumes. I don't know why. I'm grossed out by the idea of growing meat in a very sterile lab, whereas I can go and eat a rotisserie chicken, which I knew was alive and had life. And, it's funny, but I guess it's just how we're raised. We need to start to shift our thinking. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
the,
I think most people, if you asked them, would you want to eat chicken from an animal who was genetically bred to grow 6 times as quickly as she would
mm,
naturally? Like
mm-hmm,
everybody's going to say no. And yet that is more than 99% of chicken sold in the United States.
mm-hmm.
If you say to somebody, would you want to eat chicken from an animal who was killed in a slaughterhouse that has no humane law applied to it at all? Everybody's going to say no. And yet that is 100% of chicken that's consumed in the United States. So, I mean, I think biologically we're programmed not to want to eat things that seem unfamiliar. For most of human evolution,
Mm-hmm.
eating something that seemed unfamiliar might well kill you.
Mm-hmm.
But once we have clean meat, which is produced in factories that resemble breweries, and they're streaming the process online on the internet, and that is in competition with and is less expensive than, because it's so much more efficient, what happens with industrial animal agriculture, which most people don't even want to think about what a modern farm looks like. Most people don't want to even think about what a slaughterhouse looks like. Once people are choosing between the two products, and the cleaner, safer, healthier, more transparent product is actually also cheaper, I don't think Madison Avenue is going to have a hard time selling people on shifting over, even if some people have an initial queasy reaction like you did. Of course, a lot of people might just go to plant-based meat, which is also obviously a victory for all of the issues that we're talking about.
Well, if this clean meat, the Memphis meat, the petri dish meat for for that visualization, if that meat ends up becoming a significantly less expensive, people are going to buy it. That's just about the bottom line. Look at hot dogs. Look at I loved Jamie Oliver's Food Revolution. He did 2 seasons. It was about 4 years ago, I'm going to say, 4 or 5 years ago. Amazing TV show. If you can find it streaming online somewhere, go and watch it. I loved it, and I was so saddened that it didn't get picked up for a third season. Actually, I think it was like cut short on the second season. But Jamie Oliver, who's this chef, he's called the Naked Chef, not because he's actually naked, but because he's more of a Whole Foods kind of a chef. He comes from UK to the United States and goes to these small towns where he goes into the schools and he helps these kids adapt a more whole foods diet. Not necessarily, not all plant based, but instead of eating hot dogs where it's like this mystery meat, and he shows people the process of like how we get to the point where we have a McNugget, where we have a little, these chicken nuggets are actually made from this pink sludge, where they take all the bones and the joints and all the gross stuff of the animal, and then they add like all these chemicals to basically break down the animal, where we get this weird pink sludge, and then they take that pink sludge and they turn that into McNuggets.
Hmm.
And so people, a lot of times we just eat this processed food, whether we're buying it packaged in the store, frozen, like in the frozen section, or whether we're going out for for our fast food. We don't think about the process it took to make that chicken nugget. It's not just like they slaughtered a chicken and cut out a shape of a nugget
Yeah.
and put it. There was a lot of chemicals involved. It's quite disgusting. So when you think of, would I rather have that, or would I rather have a McNugget grown in a petri dish? I don't know. I think it's gonna come down to, like you said, it's gonna come down to the price and the taste. And but it's very interesting that you predict that within 100 years will be that the industrial animal agriculture will be completely changed. It'll be like Blockbuster. Remember Blockbuster 30 years
I do.
ago?
I think
Yeah.
it's going to happen as quickly as Blockbuster. So, I mean, Richard Branson invested in Memphis Meats, which is a clean meat company, and he wrote on the Virgin blog that he thinks in 30 years, 100% of meat will be either plant-based meat or clean meat. And I think that's right. It's just so much more efficient. It takes it's the worst case scenario is that it's 300% more efficient, 95% less climate change, 99% less land, 90% less water. So it is going to be less expensive as it scales up. And as it is less expensive, and as people are in a situation in which they are confronting how meat is made, like right now, people are eating chicken, beef, pork. People are eating these products kind of with their eyes squeezed shut.
Mhm.
People are not thinking about the farms, they're not thinking about the slaughterhouses. Once there is a product that is less expensive and that people can think about without moral qualms, I think people shift over. One of my favorite episodes of Jamie Oliver's show was a show in which he actually slaughtered chickens right on the air. And if you Google Jamie Oliver chicken slaughter, you can watch it. And he did it in like a manner that was exponentially more humane than what actually happens in industrial slaughterhouses, and people were horrified. And he said people should see how meat is made, and if you're not
Mhm.
comfortable with it, you shouldn't be supporting it. And Michael Pollan was on Oprah and made much the same point. Michael Pollan, who's sort of a guru of the slow food movement, also a big fan of clean meat, And he was on Oprah, and they showed cattle slaughter, and it was one cow being slaughtered for TV, so as humane as you can possibly imagine. And the audience recoiled, and Michael Pollan called them out. He said, probably just about everybody in here is eating meat, and you can't watch something this sanitized. Like, why are you paying people to do this for you if you recoil in horror at watching it?
Mm. Very, yeah, I grew up fishing every summer, and I kind of had to, as a child, I kind of had to come to that, like, am I, once I caught a fish that was big enough to feed my family, I had to come to that decision, like, do I let this go or do I kill it? Am I going to feed my family this fish or do I kill it? And it was hard. I mean, but killing what you caught, and then you do having to go through the process of cleaning out the fish and deboning it and everything and then cooking it and then putting it on the table and providing sustenance for your family. And I was doing that at age 7, but there were times when I thought, man, this doesn't feel right. I don't
Hmm.
I don't what gives me the right to take this creature's life? And my husband feels the same way. He doesn't, like, he won't even kill a spider for me. And he loves me, he'll protect me, but he won't kill anything. He won't even kill a spider for me. I think if we can sustain our health and actually gain better health from a more plant-based diet, then we're not having to torture other creatures, and that sounds great. But my concern is, what about, so people who are listening who aren't vegan, who have all these concerns about, well, what do I eat? Where does my nutrition come from then? So let's cover the basics. Where do you get your B12 from and your iron when you go vegan?
So B12 is an interesting one, and animals get their B12 from the environment. B12 is created in bacteria, and because there's bacteria in animal products, people end up getting B12. But all B12, all B12 supplements are plant-based or synthetic. So B12 is not an animal product in sort of any of its iterations. So we do recommend a B12 supplement. It's the one supplement that if somebody goes completely plant-based, we recommend that people work into your diet. And you compare the fact that there's this one nutrient that if you're entirely plant-based, it makes sense for you to supplement against the fact that if you are consuming animal products, you have obesity and heart disease and cancer and diabetes and Alzheimer's disease and impotence and sort of all of these problems. It's pretty clear that moving toward plant-based is going to win out in that debate. With regard to iron, there's plenty of iron in whole plant-based foods. And if you look out at society and you look at what are people suffering from medically, among people who are completely plant-based, iron deficiency anemia is not any greater than it is in the general population. But people who are completely plant-based are suffering from much lower rates of the diseases that are actually plaguing us. So heart disease, cancer, diabetes, the list that I just railed off. So people who are plant-based, according to the meta review by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which I would encourage people to look up, are healthier than people who are not plant-based. And the more whole plant foods you eat, and the less animal protein you eat, the healthier you will be. And certainly people are going to be healthy even with some animal protein, but it's a little bit like tobacco. The less tobacco you consume, the less alcohol you consume for the most part, the less meat you consume, likely the healthier you're going to be.
Now, you've mentioned the plant-based cleaner proteins, nuts, seeds, legumes, beans. What about the this sort of industry that's kind of popping up now, which is crickets or various bugs that we can consume for protein?
I mean, it's an animal protein, right? So, I mean, one of the things that we talk quite a bit about in the book, we dive into the sort of protein v fiber. Um, so, what nutritionists say, and what is true, according to peer reviewed science, is that more than 97% of Americans are taking in more protein than they need to be taking in. So, Even the average complete vegetarian is taking in about 60% more protein than is recommended. And literally 97, more than 97% of Americans are getting plenty of protein. The only people who are not getting plenty of protein are people who are actually nutrition, not taking in enough calories. So people who are, their bodies are literally starving for some reason, but it has to do with, taking in fewer calories than they need to be taking in. So those people are not taking in enough protein. But there is a nutrient that literally, again, 97% of Americans are not taking in enough of, and that's fiber. So according to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, women should be taking in about 25 grams of fiber a day. Men should be taking in about 38 grams of fiber a day. And the average American is taking in 15. So nowhere near what people are supposed to be consuming. And literally 100% of the peer review science indicates that taking in enough protein is likely to lower your rates for all of those diseases that I just ticked off. So it's kind of interesting. A whole foods plant-based diet is good for you, in part because of the fiber and the phytonutrients. And an animal-based diet is not good for you, in part because of the toxins and because of the lack of fiber. And you take, products that are not good for you, and you crowd them out with products that are good for you, and it's really a nutrition powerhouse in terms of being healthier just all around.
What is your opinion, or based on all this, the science? Because you can see arguments from both sides, and there's an argument. Well, humans, the way their teeth are and the way their digestive tract is, we're meant to eat meat. What do you say to those people who have that as one of the reasons why we should not be vegan?
I mean, you're not going to find anybody who has even taken an introductory course to human physiology that would say that. So it's sort of an odd talking point. I mean, maybe, I don't know where it comes from, but there's absolutely no scientific validity to it. And there's a really interesting piece by a physicians committee for responsible medicine doctor named Milton Mills, who's a professor at George Washington University Medical Center. And an article called "A Comparative Anatomy of Eating." And in this article, he points out that every single animal that consumes a significant amount of meat has about 20 physiological characteristics that do not align with human physiology. So every single animal that consumes a significant amount of meat has a bone teeth density that is 5 times greater than ours, has acids in their stomachs that are significantly more powerful, has a very short digestive tract, something on the order of 3 times their body, whereas ours, I think, is more like 10 times the length of our body. There's just this long list of things, but just intuitively, this makes sense. So if you think about every natural carnivore, they eat their meat raw, and their bodies are designed to digest it. However many years ago, human beings discovered, hey, if we cook this meat, we can digest it, and it won't kill us instantly. But we're the only animal who eats, who has to cook our meat in order for us to be able to process it. Physiologically, we are herbivores. We are not carnivores. We are not omnivores. Our body is designed to process plant foods, not animal foods.
Interesting. I'd love to know, could you share with us some examples of what you eat? Like, what did you eat for breakfast today?
So yeah, we talk about this in the book as well. Both Kathy, my co-author, and I start every day with a smoothie. She puts protein powder in her smoothie, and we have a couple of pages in the book about protein powder and the best protein powders and the least good protein powders. But I do start every day with a fruit and nut smoothie. So a quarter cup of flax seeds, a little more than a quarter cup of walnuts, a couple whole pieces of fruit, a couple of cups of soy milk, a cup of frozen berries, a frozen banana, and I think that's the totality of my smoothie. And then for lunch, it's usually some sort of grain with some sort of protein. So today, rice and beans. Oftentimes, I'll have a snack, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or um, granola with soy milk or oat milk or almond milk. Those sorts of things. We actually about half the book, I think, is recipes. So there's an awful lot of clean protein recipes in the book. I think somewhere on the order of maybe 60 to 70 recipes.
And can you give us an idea as to what you'd eat for dinner?
Well, my wife's Indian, so we eat an awful lot of like chana masala, which is a sort of spicy chickpea dish with rice or with bread. We eat vegan versions of lasagna using a sort of tofu ricotta. Uh, we do like the plant-based meats, so especially there's Tofurkey has some really fantastic deli slices and some fantastic sausages. Beyond Meat has a Beyond Meat crumble and the Beyond Burger, which are pretty fantastic. We really like. I mean, we're big fans of kind of all of the plant-based meats, and then a variety of bean and whole grain dishes, quinoa, buckwheat, um, rice, various legumes.
Wonderful. So it sounds like there's plenty of options. So those who are worried about, well, what would I eat instead? What you're saying is the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I mean, just opening randomly to the entree section of the book, you know, Greek beans and tomato sauce, frijoles de olla, tofu, chorizo, Three Sisters saute. So, I mean, it's there really, and there are so many vegan cookbooks by vegan authors, and even not. So, like Mark Bittman has a completely vegetarian cookbook. The New York Times food columnist has a complete, I think it's called Cook Everything Vegetarian or something like that. He also has a book called Vegan Before Six, in which he encourages people to sort of lean into veganism by eating plant-based exclusively until 6 p.m. And then starting at 6, you can eat whatever you want. And he has a lot of really fantastic recipes in there as well.
At first I loved that idea, but then I thought, man, it would make us feel so kind of like sluggish and bloated if we ate wonderful plant-based foods all day and then at 6 p.m. we start eating meat and that has to like sit in our gut all night. It would probably turn people off of meat pretty quickly when they realize how good they feel all day eating the plant-based diet and then kind of how sluggish they feel at night when that meat is sitting in their stomach digesting all night.
Yeah, I mean, in the book, Mark does advocate eating both only plant-based until 6, and then he says eat whatever you want after 6. But all the recipes do lean toward not getting more than about a deck of cards size amount of meat. So I think part of it might be, you know, a bit of ulterior motive, eat whatever you want, but you'll quickly realize that you feel a lot better on a plant-based diet than on a diet that slows you down, like a heavy meat diet. But then the recipes and really his suggestion is to even after 6 be consuming roughly a third. I think if you add it up, you end up consuming on the order of 50 to 60 pounds of meat a year rather than 220 pounds of meat a year. I mean, it really is a sort of arresting thing to realize that the average American is eating in 1 year significantly more than their body weight in meat. Certainly, eating a third of that, eating to 50 to 60 pounds of meat in a year, that seems like it would be more than enough for even the most diehard meat eater. I think most people just don't realize how much they're consuming.
It is pretty crazy. I had to make a brisket for Christmas dinner, and so going to buy one and just seeing just like how much meat is out there was pretty crazy because I normally only buy in very small amounts, organic, clean, quote unquote clean protein. But then going to Costco and buying this giant bulk thing of meat, I was kind of flabbergasted just how much people are eating and how much meat is out there and seeing all the videos of the like you said the industrial agriculture the slaughterhouses I've said this on the show before, driving from Seattle to LA or to San Diego, we'll drive through parts of California where for miles you have to roll up the windows and turn off the air from being on in the fan from being on in the car so that you don't breathe in the fumes of the fields of cows. There's no grass. There's you can't even see the ground. It's just cows packed in together for miles and miles, and as far as the eye can see, all you can see are cows, and you're smelling their waste, and the fumes will burn your eyes and burn your lungs, and these poor animals have to live in it their entire life.
I mean, those are the animals who actually get to be outside, right? Like, I mean, one of the things that is sort of an aha experience for a lot of people is to point out, no matter how much you drive around, you will not see on the side of the road chickens or turkeys or pigs. More than 99% of chickens, turkeys, and pigs spend their entire lives confined. So it's all of the just putrid smell that you just described, but contained in a shed. So it's actually even worse for those animals. So
Mhm.
I mean, the entire system is really it's a filthy, rotten system. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for the global poor. It's bad for human health. And it's particularly bad for animals.
Now your book just came out, so congratulations. I'm already seeing it has a ton of great reviews on Amazon. For those who have read your book and given you feedback, do you have any stories of success or stories from those who've read your book that you'd like to share with us?
Well, the book just came out a couple days ago, but we have been deeply gratified by the positive response that we got from early reviewers. So, we've got on the back of the book there are quotes from four medical doctors who are particularly focused on nutrition. So, Dr. Dean Ornish from Dr. Dean Ornish's program for reversing heart disease says, in an accessible and friendly manner, Kathy and Bruce provide a step by step guide to a healthier and happier you. And really nice comments from David Katz from the True Health Initiative, and Michael Greger, the author of How Not to Die, and David Wiebers, Emeritus Professor of Neurology at Mayo Clinic. So far, the positive response has been from the people to whom we sent an early copy of the book and actually asked for a blurb because general readers haven't had it yet, which just came out on Tuesday.
Awesome. Well, perfect timing for us to help us implement our 2018 health and wellness goals. I'm thinking about buying actually, I'm going to buy your book for a relative of mine who is struggling with some health issues. Is your book something that if we give it to someone and they read it, would it really be motivational to make the changes that they need to make? Like, so obviously I'm going to read the book for myself, but I'm thinking about like who in my life could benefit from your book. So is your book something that when someone reads it, it just all that science there is so heavily motivational to help them start to implement these new changes?
That is certainly the goal of the book. And so I hope that we've accomplished that. I mean, I think if you look at the Amazon page for the book and look at the blurbs, one of the things that appears to be universal is the sense that we have distilled the science into stories. So we've taken the science and we certainly cite it, but we also tell stories and try to sort of humanize it, make it sound easy because it is, not guilt people because that doesn't work. Really just sort of walk with people and tell our story and invite people to lean into this change with the suggestion that the further you lean into the change, the better you are going to feel. And then offer a step by step practical guide to actually help people do it. Because one of the things that behavioral research has shown is that simply telling people what to do or telling people that something is important doesn't get people there. You actually need to show them how to do it. So we spend a good portion of the book walking people through how to do it, and we've been really gratified by the response of reviewers who seem to think that we come across as friendly and non-judgmental, and the text is really easy and fast-paced. That's what we're going for, and we've been gratified by the response so far. So I hope so. I hope that it does exactly what you were just asking. That's the goal.
Yeah, well, you have an incredible amount already. You just launched and you have a ton of 5-star reviews on Amazon, so it must be a great book. They must have all gotten the ebook form and already read it to be giving you so many great testimonials. So that is.
Amazon Amazon has something called their Vine. Like I don't really understand the nature of it exactly, but they have something called like the Vine. And so Amazon, you can't review a book before the date it comes out unless you're a part of this sort of Amazon reading club. And if you are a part of the Amazon reading club, they send you the book for free, like maybe 6 weeks before it comes out. So unlike the vast majority of, I'm not sure how Hachette got us into this program, but unlike the vast majority of books, Hachette got us into this program. So they offer people the book in exchange for free in exchange for reviewing it. So we started ahead of the game.
Oh, very cool. Well, you made them happy. They're all
Yeah,
very,
no, it's
they all think it's really cool. I've read a few of their reviews, and they're very in depth, and they explain what they loved about the book and what they learned, and I think that's really cool. Um, Also, because I've been looking for a book that I could start to give people as enough science and enough a convincing read to help people make this transition to better, healthier eating. I'm not telling everyone to go vegan, but like you said, if we could just cut our meat consumption or animal product consumption down to 1/3 and consume more whole foods plant-based diet, that would completely shift everyone's health. I know myself, our family has shifted more into a plant-based diet, and I can't believe how much better we feel in the last few years that we've done that. So I definitely encourage listeners to try that. Starting with the Meatless Monday, I think that's a really great idea. The link to your book is going to be in the show notes of the podcast, so listeners can go there to check out the book. I'd love for you to just tell us a bit more about your Good Food Institute. What's the Good Food Institute all about? And what are you guys doing there?
Yeah, let me just take one quick step back. Like we've said a couple of times, cut meat consumption to a third. Average meat consumption in the United States is about 220 pounds. So if people are eating a third of that, that is still 70 pounds of meat a year, more than 70 pounds of meat a year. And that is a little over 3 ounces a day, which is what the American Cancer Society recommends. It's what the American Heart Association recommends. I mean, they all say you'll be healthier the less meat you eat, but this is what they consider to be, for people who want to eat meat, this is what they consider to be optimal. And that's still plenty of meat. I mean, that's, basically a quarter pounder or a chicken filet sandwich every single day. And nobody needs that, but hopefully nobody's going to feel deprived cutting to that level of meat consumption. So just to sort of put it in terms that people can like sort of easily picture, that I think is a huge step in the right direction. And I think most people who do that will mirror your experience. As people cut back, they do feel better. They do have more energy. They do feel less sluggish. So the Good Food Institute, I hope people will check it out online. We're just at gfi.org. And GFI, we have a team of scientists and entrepreneurs and people engaging in corporate engagement. We've got lobbyists and lawyers, and all of it is focused on helping the plant-based meat and the clean meat industries to compete with industrial animal agriculture. So the scientists are figuring out the science of biomimicry and the science of scale up. The innovation department is helping startups, and we have campus programs that reach out to the best schools for entrepreneurship and plant biology, and educate people about the amount of good they can do in the world by helping with this global transition away from industrial animal agriculture and toward plant-based and clean alternatives. Our corporate engagement department has fantastic relationships with Tyson and Cargill and ADM, and is reaching out to sort of the big meat to educate them about the value of R&D and M&A activity in this field to try to make it not a disruption, but a transformation. And that seems to be the way that it's going. Our policy department is talking with members of Congress about funding R&D in the plant-based meat and the clean meat industry. We put more than $3 billion a year into agricultural research in the United States. And right now, none of that goes to these alternative agricultural technologies. We're trying to change that. We have an administrative law attorney and a lot of pro bono attorneys who are helping us understand the regulatory scope for the plant-based and the clean alternatives in order to level the playing field. And then we have an international department. Right now, we have representatives in Brazil and India, and we are expanding this year into China and Israel and Europe.
That is incredible. I'm just remembering the pushback when Oprah mentioned that she after being having her eyes open to the costs, the physical costs on our body and the planet of meat, she said, "I'm going to eat less, I'm going to eat less hamburgers." and and out of that she was sued by wasn't it the cattle ranchers in Texas, uh
Yeah, no, that's exactly
and
right. You just stopped me cold from ever eating another burger to a
right.
to a representative of the Humane Society of the United States. And his name is Howard Lyman. He's a fourth generation cattle rancher. He and Oprah ended up getting sued, and they did prevail in the end.
I remember I watched, diligently. I was on the edge of my seat. I remember that whole scenario as she had to fight, go to court every day, and so she started filming her show, there in Texas,
Yeah.
and I just remember like just feeling this like knot in my throat, for her and for how kind of sick the world was that someone can't speak the truth without getting sued, because it's about making money. And so you as your organization, you must be preparing for coming up against a lot of pushback by
Well,
these the industrial animal agriculture that is highly invested in keeping it the way it is.
I mean, our hope is that they will not be invested in keeping it the way it is. So, just in the last few months, the largest meat company in Canada, called Maple Leaf, has bought two plant-based meat companies, a company called Field Roast and another one called Light Life. Tyson Foods, one of the very first investment once they opened a venture capital fund, Tyson Ventures, their very first investment was in a plant-based meat company called Beyond Meat. As we discussed earlier, Cargill has invested in Memphis Meats. The largest poultry company in Europe has invested in Super Meat. So, I mean, the thing about all of these companies is they are made up of individuals. And I am absolutely convinced that individuals are basically good. Individuals, everybody supports compassion for animals. Everybody would like to see a more sustainable world. Nobody is excited about slaughterhouses or inefficiency or climate, causing more climate change than necessary. For the most part, people go into these industries, they get out of business school and they go to the sort of best job that is offered to them, and then they end up in these roles, and their job is to sell whatever product their job is to sell. But if they can shift, if they can transform away from harm and to benefit, most people will want to do that. So um, our hope and expectation on the basis of the people that we've met, and the work that we've been doing so far, is that we can create a seamless transition to healthier and more sustainable and more compassionate food supply.
That's very exciting. Now, how does the Good Food Institute make money? Is this a nonprofit? Can we donate, or how can we support your efforts?
Thank you so much, Ashley. Yes, the Good Food Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we have a donate page at the top of our gfi.org website, and we would be absolutely thrilled if people were called to check out our mission and look at our team and look at what it is that we're up to. And if you would like to create a healthier and more humane food system, we would be delighted if you would sign up for our e-news, and add us to your philanthropic portfolio. That would make us really proud and pleased.
I was really impressed, going through your website, gfi.org. And of course, that link is going to be in the show notes of the podcast as well as your book. I was really impressed when I looked through your team. I couldn't believe how many PhDs you have on your team. And so this is a really well thought out, well organized company you have, a well organized organization. That no wonder you're on the forefront of helping to change the world. Seeing how the world in the last 100 years has kind of sort of moved, everyone's following America. I mean, I'm Canadian. I'm from Canada. I live in the States now, though, and we all like look at when McDonald's is introduced into other countries. That people, those countries are adapting how we eat, how the standard American diet. So if America can shift, then the rest of the world will shift, and that's the fulcrum point. We all want to maintain our own culture. I'm sure every country wants to maintain its culture, but if we look at it, every country, every industrialized nation is pretty much following suit with America. And so you are on the forefront of helping to shift how we eat here, and that'll shift the world. And that feels like a pretty big responsibility. You must be very excited.
I am extremely excited, and it is just really exciting to see all of the people like Richard Branson and Bill Gates and Eric Schmidt and so many other people who are also excited. I mean, on the one hand, so many people in Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is just the ultimate sort of can-do attitude. So that's exciting, and it's neat to be a part of that. On the other hand, one of the things that GFI is really focused on is convincing governments that they need to be more involved, because governments obviously don't want to poison their systems, poison their citizens. Governments don't want to lead to the end of working antibiotics. Governments do want more sustainable products. So a big part of our policy department and our international engagement is focused on saying, hey, to the governments that are signed on to the Paris Climate Agreement, you're not going to meet the Paris Climate Agreement unless animal product consumption goes down. And the best way to do that is funding your scientists who are plant biologists and synthetic biologists and tissue engineers, funding them to do the R&D to bring these alternative products to market as quickly as possible. So it's exciting, and I think it's inevitable, but there's a lot that all of us can be doing to make it happen a lot more quickly. And I will just say for listeners, we have about 15 or 16 job openings. So also check out gfi.org /jobs. It's pretty easy to find from the GFI homepage as well.
Yeah, you've got this little "we're hiring" in the top of the page. I saw that. Very, very cool. And I'm sure a big thing is also helping the government to shift where it subsidizes the I just can't believe how much we subsidize certain crops for to feed the cows, for example. And if there's a way to shift the subsidies towards cleaner protein or more plant-based foods, that would be interesting. But and we also see what the government does in terms of school, right? In terms of elementary schools and high schools, and the cafeteria food is just, it's all about the bottom dollar. It's all about having to be as cheap as possible. And so how can we encourage the schools to adapt a healthier, more whole foods, plant-based diet, and less highly processed foods and highly processed animal products, so that we can help to educate children? Because if we need to shift the palette of our diet, we need to shift society's palette, so that we are comfortable with consuming more whole foods, and that we are okay with, like eating less and less, or no animal products, and still feeling happy and satisfied about it. And if we can create a stronger education around that for children, then parents get on board, and then the whole within one generation, the entire society can shift. And so I hope your organization is also focused on somehow transforming that conversation.
We are, and I think that's two different conversations. But we have actually a team of attorneys at a couple of high power law firms helping us to navigate the school lunch program in order to help plant-based companies to get in there more successfully. It is definitely tilted in favor of animal products and against plant-based alternatives, but that's something that we're working on changing. And then one of our business analysts in our innovation team has a first draft of a guide. I imagine it'll be up in the next month, that is designed to help plant-based companies understand the system as it exists at the moment and figure out how to introduce and package their products such that they can get into the schools. So it's something that some companies have been having. One of the really cool things about plant-based products is that most of the people who are running these companies are pretty mission focused and mission aligned. And so it really is, there's just tremendous camaraderie. And people across all of these companies are open to helping everybody else across all of these companies. They recognize what's true, that a rising tide lifts all boats. So a success for Beyond Meat or Tofurkey or Field Roast or Impossible Foods is also a success for all of the rest of them, because it changes the way that society thinks about meat and shifts society toward recognizing that plant-based meat can be equally satisfying or more satisfying and is more healthy. So as some companies manage to navigate the regulatory morass, which is the school lunch program, they are being very gracious in helping other companies to figure out how to do that as well. And I think they're right that everybody who does that just makes it more and more normal for the schools to offer these products. And GFI is coordinating a lot of those efforts, and we'll be releasing more and more white papers to just help everybody better understand it.
Very cool. I love it. I love it. It is David and Goliath, but I'm rooting for David. And
Me
I
too.
love that you're what you'd mentioned, that all these companies, like, even though Tofurkey is not related to the I'm not at the moment remembering the other names, but they're not, those companies are, would be considered competitors, but they're actually not, because any advancement that a, vegan protein or plant-based protein company makes is an advancement for all of them, because they need to get in there, and take enough of the share so that they become a household name, so that it becomes more popular. So we haven't got to the tipping point yet. I think it's, what is it, 10%? 10%, if 10% of the country consumes it, that sort of then becomes the tipping point. There's a certain tipping point where then it
Hmm,
can
yeah.
it can race forward. And so they're all pushing together as a single unit with a single mission. So that is quite exciting, because you look at the industrial animal agriculture now, and it sort of feels like doomsday. I feel like one day we're all going to be living in Soylent Green, the end of Soylent Green, where you realize it's quite morbid, the direction we've been going in. And when, if anyone takes any time to study where our food comes from, unless we're buying like local organic, where our food comes from is very scary. And no wonder we are suffering from so many health conditions. Just the standard American diet alone has increased diabetes, heart disease, and cancer in the last 50 years. It's not going in the right direction. I love that you are your mission is to turn it towards the right direction. But we can't just sit here dormantly and wait for you to do it for us. I think it's going to take all of us together to do it, whether we're just voting with our fork, something as simple as just buying more vegetables, introducing more legumes, beans, nuts, and seeds into our family's diet, and choosing to buy less meat, or doing meatless Mondays. Whatever we can do, those tiny little choices add up so big. We just broached 2 million downloads. And so if you can imagine, we have um, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who could take this mission on. And
Hmm.
and if 100,000 people chose to do meatless Mondays, look at how much we could shape the world. Or if 100,000 people could just choose to eat, what was it, 77 pounds of meat a year instead of
Exactly.
220 pounds of meat a year, that will make a big difference. And so your choice as a single listener is going to make a difference, because you're going to share this podcast, you're going to share, this mission, and maybe you'll help three more people, and then those people help three more people and three more people, and it begins to spread. But I love the idea that in 50 to 100 years we will have shifted the entire globe, so that we're more plant-based, so that we're not farming animals. could you imagine ending starvation globally? You know, if we take all of our focus, all the energy we've been putting towards feeding animals to slaughter them, and instead take all that energy towards feeding everyone. I know there's a lot of things, a lot of logistics to kind of figure that out, but we're essentially making too much food. And if
Hmm.
we took all that food that we were feeding the animals and fed the world, I know it's very idealistic to say that, but it's possible. So we could end global starvation and significantly help the planet. So which in turn helps our own health. So I'm excited for your mission. I'd love to have you back on the show in the future to share any milestones or landmarks as your mission progresses. I think it's really important that we check in to see that we are in fact making progress, but we're only going to make progress if the listeners do something about it. So I highly encourage them to check out gfi.org and also your book Clean Protein, and both the links will be in the show notes of the podcast. Bruce, do you have anything that is left unsaid? Do you have anything that you'd like to say to the listener to sum up today's interview?
Well, I mean, one thing that I was thinking as you were talking is that on the one hand, it's absolutely true that it's not as simple as we free up all this grain and suddenly everybody everywhere has food. There are sociopolitical issues. On the other hand, we do live in a global marketplace. And a number of years ago, the UN Global Envoy on Food, this guy Jean Ziegler, denounced the diversion of wheat and corn into biofuels because doing that drives up the price of wheat and corn, and causes people to not be able to eat, to starve people. And the thing is, the same UN Food and Agriculture Organization report that set Ziegler off, it said that 100 million metric tons of corn and wheat is turned into biofuels. That same report pointed out that 756 million metric tons of corn and wheat is turned into chicken feed and pig feed. It's turned into animal feed. And that doesn't even include the 85% of the global soy crop. So 85% of all soy produced is fed to farm animals. They're literally chopping down the Amazon rainforest to grow soy, to export, to feed to farm animals. So there's a lot that's sort of interlinked here. And I think one of the fundamental things is Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And it's kind of all philosophy since then has been commentary on that. But the unexamined life is not worth living. Most people don't think that much about the processes that go into food. And once you do dive into it, we don't spend as much time in our book on this, but once you dive into it, you find that it's not just the health issue. A lot is rotten about the way that we produce food, such that the inefficiency of growing crops to feed them to animals, it literally does lead to more global poverty. It does cause a lot more climate change. It is vastly inefficient and polluting. And it's also bad for animals and bad for human health. So shifting away, it's win, 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 win. And that's all stuff that we talk about in the book Clean Protein. And I hope people will check it out, read it, and shoot me an email. Let me know what you think.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure that your email is also available in the show notes of the podcast. So when they go to those links, they'll be able to access it. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show, Bruce. Congratulations on the launch of your book and on everything that you're doing with the Good Food Institute. I think it is marvelous, your mission. And again, I'd love to have you back on the show sometime in the future when you have some milestones to share with us
Great.
so that we can know that our efforts are paying off.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. I really enjoyed chatting with you. And thank you so much for doing your podcast. Podcasts about issues that matter are so important. And I'm impressed by your spirit, by your enthusiasm, and by your success. All of it is just really fantastic. It's been an honor to spend a little bit of time with you.
Enjoy what you heard today on your episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Did something move you, inspire you? Did you get great information that's going to change your life? Awesome. That's exactly what I'm here to do, is to help you gain your health back. Please turn around and share this. If this is something that's helped you in any way, share this with those you love. Love the Learn True Health podcast and want to support us? Awesome. You can go to takeyoursupplements.com and you can support us that way. You'll get access to amazing supplements that are just really great quality for a great price. And there'll be someone on the other end of the line to help you pick out your supplements that are right for you. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Or join our membership, learntruehealth.com/join. That's another great way to support our podcast, support our movement, and you'll be supporting yourself. Gain more information, wonderful videos, wonderful trainings, and you'll also be able to share those with those you love as well. So go to learntruehealth.com/join. Want something fun for free? Go to learntruehealth.com, and right there on the front page, you'll see where you can get our free cookbook. I spent a lot of time making it, and it was so much fun. It's really delicious, healthy recipes. And you can also get our 7-day doctor course. Right there, it's 7 days of naturopathic videos sent right to your inbox, and you can learn from top naturopaths on how to gain health naturally. So that's takeyoursupplements.com for wonderful supplements. learntruehealth.com/join to join our awesome membership, which is only open for a limited time. You can get our free healthy cookbook, and you can also get for free 7 days of wonderful naturopathic videos sent to you. Just go to learntruehealth.com and you'll see it right there on the front page. Thank you so much for being a listener, and thank you for sharing and helping others. Let's spread this information and turn this ripple into a tidal wave.